This is How America Was Stolen, Episode 34. Recognition came wrapped in careful language. By the late 20th century, the United States began to publicly acknowledge what it could no longer deny: that Native nations still existed, that treaties still mattered, and that past policies had caused real harm. But recognition was not the same as restoration. Episode 34 begins where hope and limitation collided. Native nations were told they were sovereign, but only within boundaries drawn by someone else. They were told they could govern themselves, but only if their decisions did not interfere with federal interests. They were told they were free, but only on land that had already been reduced, regulated, and controlled. The cage had changed shape. The government introduced policies of self-determination, presenting them as progress. Tribes could manage certain programs, oversee some resources, and run their own institutions. On paper, it looked like empowerment. In reality, the final authority still rested elsewhere. Funding came with conditions. Jurisdiction came with limits. Land came fragmented, often surrounded by non-native ownership. State authority and federal oversight. Every decision existed inside a system that could override it at any moment. Sovereignty was acknowledged, but not fully respected. This contradiction showed itself everywhere. Tribal courts existed, but their power was restricted. Native police enforced law, but often lacked authority over non-native offenders on native land. Environmental decisions could be overruled if they conflicted with corporate or national interests. Native nations were treated as governments, until their power became inconvenient. Nowhere was this more visible than in land and resources. Oil, gas, uranium, water, timber. The wealth beneath native land attracted constant attention. Companies negotiated leases through federal agencies, not directly with tribes. Profits flowed outward, while pollution remained behind. Communities paid the price with poisoned water, damaged land, and long-term health consequences. When native nations resisted, they were told development was inevitable. When they protested, they were accused of blocking progress. When they demanded consent, they were reminded who still held control. The old logic returned in modern language. Progress for some required sacrifice from others. And that sacrifice was expected to be native. Episode 34 shows how the fight shifted into courtrooms, policy rooms, and boardrooms. Lawsuits replaced marches. Legal briefs replaced chants. Survival required mastering a system never designed to protect them. Victories came, but slowly, unevenly, and often reversed. A tribe might win recognition of land rights in one case, only to lose jurisdiction in another. A treaty might be upheld one year, reinterpreted the next. Every gain felt temporary. Nothing was guaranteed. And yet, native nations continued. They rebuilt governments. They strengthened cultural institutions. They educated new generations in law, history, and language. They learned how to fight on terrain forced upon them, without losing who they were. But the emotional cost was heavy. To constantly prove existence, to constantly defend rights already promised, to constantly negotiate for what had never been willingly returned. Recognition without freedom became its own form of control. The system could now say, "We acknowledge you," while still refusing to let go. Episode 34 reminds us that theft does not always look violent. Sometimes it looks administrative. Sometimes it looks legal. Sometimes it looks like compromise that only runs one way. America had moved beyond removal and overt assimilation, but it had not moved beyond possession. Native nations were still living on land taken from them, under laws written without them, negotiating within systems built on their loss. The story was no longer about whether native people existed. It was about whether America was willing to honor what that existence demanded. And as the next episode reveals, one struggle would bring this